struggling with a little bit of a cold, so hope I'll be all right to get through this morning. So thank you very much for joining me this morning to talk about our climate change responsibilities, including our progress towards net zero. Last month, world leaders came together in Egypt for COP27. Following a fortnight of difficult negotiations, there was both hope and disappointment. Hope came from the agreement to create a fund for the most vulnerable nations to support them with the very real impacts of climate change. But the disappointment came as countries could not make further progress to phase out fossil fuels. This was something we committed to in the Glasgow COP26 when we joined the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance. This week marks the start of another COP conference, COP15, which is focused on biodiversity, and I'll be attending the conference in Montreal. I'm looking forward to working with other countries to agree an ambitious new global biodiversity framework, which will define a decade of action for nature recovery around the world. The nature and climate emergencies are not something for a far-off distant future. We are experiencing them right now. This is why Wales became the first nation to declare a nature emergency in 2021. This is also why international conferences like COP15 are so very important. Our programme for government commits us to embed our response to the climate and nature emergency in everything we do. COP15 is not just an opportunity to create change for the future and to engage global and local leaders. It's an opportunity to show what we're doing here in Wales. I will be able to show how Wales has been tackling the joint nature and climate crises through, for example, action on peatlands. And also later today, we will be debating the final stages of our landmark bill to introduce a ban on many forms of single-use plastic in Wales. As a partner to the Edinburgh process and a signatory of the Edinburgh Declaration, we are proud champions of subnational governments striving to halt the decline of biodiversity. And I will be pressing for the adoption of a plan of action on subnational governments, cities and other local authorities for biodiversity, which recognises the vital role we and local governments play in driving and delivering action to reverse decline and deliver a nature-positive future. Now is not a time for complacency. I want now to turn to net zero. You will all know we are committed to reaching net zero by 2050. It's a challenging target and one which we will need the whole of society to work together to make changes if we are to be successful. I want to make sure that as our economy changes, it is fair to everyone. We must not leave anyone behind or anyone out. We must address existing inequalities, not exacerbate them or create new ones. We must ensure the change is planned effectively and equitably, not simply protecting industries and their employees, but strengthening them, developing skills for future markets, and ensuring the most vulnerable in society are not unfairly burdened with the costs of change. This week, I will be launching a call for evidence on a just transition to net zero in Wales. Our first policy, which we launched when we launched Net Zero Wales a year ago, was a commitment to transitioning to net zero with social justice at its heart. We are now seeking evidence to identify where both negative impacts and opportunities might appear. We are also seeking evidence of need for our communities, economy and infrastructure, so we can see where support can be targeted to ensure a just transition. We also want to gather evidence on best practice so this can be shared. We are committed to moving away from the fossil-fueled economy of the past to a new low-carbon future. In the present economic and cost of living crisis, we have to work with businesses and communities to do this in a fair and equitable way. In the immediate term, we must find ways of tackling the cost of living and energy crisis, protecting Welsh households, workers and businesses in ways which do not exacerbate the climate crisis. We also need to ensure the UK government plays its part. That means going beyond levelling up and thinking about the wider impacts and opportunities across the whole of the UK. We need your evidence and research to help inform this work, and we will be publishing details of how you can get involved later this week. Our climate is already changing, as the increasing number of devastating weather events here and around the world shows. They provide a sobering reminder that as well as reducing emissions, we also need to build resilience to a changing climate. Climate change brings with it risks to our communities, infrastructure, public health, and the natural resources on which we depend. This is why this week we will also be publishing a progress report on the delivery of Prosperity for All, a climate-conscious Wales, our current climate adaptation plan. We already know the negative impacts of a changing climate are likely to disproportionately affect global and Welsh communities with the least resources. We will therefore continue to develop our climate mitigation adaptation policies to ensure fairness and equality are at the heart of our approach. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. I will take questions next. So the first person to be asked to ask questions is Dan Bevan, who's with us.
Thank you very much, Minister. Good morning. If I could turn attention to other important matters. Today, the ONS say that the number of Welsh speakers has fallen over the last decade. It has risen slightly in parts of South Wales, but doesn't that show that there are perhaps more traditional communities in North Wales that have been neglected by the Welsh Government's programmes to get 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050? And do these figures not show that so far the Welsh Government is failing on that target?
Well, it's true that it's a disappointing figure. No, I'm sure there are a number of reasons, and obviously I'm not the Minister for Welsh Language. But just to say that as a government, we are entirely committed to it. Welsh, as we've just seen in the World Cup and with the rugby, is very much a fundamental part of our culture. Watching all those people singing Amra Hyd, and the fact that everyone, I think, in the entire world actually accepts that our national anthem and flag are the very best, shows the real pride in this. So from our point of view, we're positively pushing ahead with making sure that the Welsh language is preserved and used by future generations. I'm really pleased that we've been able to do a number of things around second homes and targeted interventions in communities which are very beautiful in Wales, but therefore attract people wanting to come and live here, so that people who do come and live here can integrate with us, learn to speak our languages, integrate with our communities, and make sure that in doing so they strengthen and help us evolve the language.
Thank you, Minister. And also on Strep A, we've seen 9 children sadly die, one in South Wales. How concerned are the Welsh Government by these figures and the spread of the virus in more general terms? Is it to be expected that we will have more cases across Wales? And what is the Welsh Government doing about it?
So again, obviously, I'm not the health minister, but what we would say to people is, don't panic if you think your child has Strep A. Seek medical attention immediately. Doesn't matter how flimsy you think the evidence is, seek that medical help. Either seek it through 111 or go to your GP direct and make sure that your child has the medical help that they need. We will, of course, have health boards working on contingency arrangements to make sure that people can be covered with that. And of course, the health minister will be doing public health announcements alongside Public Health Wales to help us with this. But the big message here is don't panic and make sure you seek help. Okay, so the next person that we have is Sahaj Jaspal, who's also with us.
Morning, Minister. Thank you. What are you aiming to achieve at COP15, and what real change can come from it, as opposed to sort of the disappointments you spoke about at the previous COP conference?
We're hoping to make sure that we play our part in setting the targets for the 30 by 30 goal. So these are targets for biodiversity recovery. And also we're hoping to make sure that the subnational, as they're called, governments, so the regions and states of the world with whom we have very good alliances, come together and share best practice. So it was really helpful at Glasgow, for example, to make connections right across the globe with different states. So we work very closely with the Sao Paulo government, a government that might look very different to ours because it's a super city on the world, but actually has very similar problems and wants the just transition that we want. So together we can come together to make really concrete things happen on the ground. And we can understand from them what they're able to do, and we can teach them what we're able to do. So I'm hoping to share our peatland recovery program. I'm hoping to speak to the Quebec government, for example, about forestry practices. And we know that there will be governments from across the world there who we will have a close liaison with. And we make the arrangements to speak to them on an ongoing basis, not just at COP.
And you've spoken about a low carbon future. Are there any concerns about plans for new nuclear plants in Flintshire and other plants across Wales being developed?
So nuclear is an interesting one, isn't it? Because obviously we'd very much like the Wilva plant to be developed properly. There are some experimental small nuclear reactors. We're looking at some in Trasfynydd, and there's a centre of excellence for nuclear science up in northwest Wales, which we're very proud of. But the thing there is to make sure that it's only a very small part of the mix and takes its proper place. What we really want is to see real action on renewables like wind and solar. And in particular, we want the UK government to work closely with us and the Crown Estates to develop the opportunities in the Celtic Sea to make sure that the people of Wales really benefit from that. Thank you very much. The next person is David Deans, and I think he's on screen. David.
Minister, good morning. Why do you think Gordon Brown's report into devolution published yesterday ignored the Welsh Government's long-held view that justice and policing should be fully devolved?
So I don't think it did ignore it. I think it's that's a very glass half empty view of it. We take a very glass half full view of it. The report talks about a symmetrical devolution process, which would of course lead both policing and justice to come to Wales. We thought it was a hopeful report. It spoke well about the need for communities to have the services closer to them for decision making, and that's a sentiment that the Welsh Government has long held. Our close working relationship with our local authorities shows that. So we think the report is both helpful and a blueprint for the future.
So you weren't disappointed by the report then? It didn't seem to have a lot to say about Wales. The Welsh content in the report seemed pretty thin.
So we know that the First Minister and Gordon Brown spent some time together. They were very much of one mind. We thought the report was good from our point of view. Obviously, it was speaking about Great Britain as a whole, and we want to see the kinds of devolution to local areas that we have long called for as part of our Constitutional Commission. We think it's a good starting point and a place to build. Diolch. The next person is David Nicholson from the Morning Star.
Morning. The Welsh TUC has already done quite a bit of work on a just transition and how that impacts on the lower paid and more disadvantaged people. And you mentioned about the evidence gathering group that you're putting together. Who's involved with that?
So we're asking for evidence from across Wales, from all our communities, from our employers, our third sector, our actual people on the ground, anyone who thinks that they can contribute to us understanding where we are now and what we need to do for that just transition. So we have a whole series of plans in place already, David. Sorry, excuse me. From our net zero skills plan, for example, and our transitional programs, what we're looking for now is evidence, as I said, of both the disadvantages of moving to low carbon economies and very specifically the advantages of doing so that we can make sure that we're first movers here on the ground. And in particular, as I mentioned, the Celtic Sea earlier, making sure, for example, that when we exploit the resources of the Celtic Sea in terms of wind power, that we bring the manufacturing jobs, the green jobs here to Wales, not just the maintenance and supply chain jobs, but actually the manufacturing and engineering jobs, so that the really highly skilled labour that already exists in South Wales, associated with the oil terminals and the steel plants, can be used in that just transition across to green skills. We have a lot to offer here in Wales, and the Welsh Government wants to understand from businesses how we can best present that on a global stage.
When you say businesses, you mean the trade unions as well, presumably. And
oh, absolutely.
Presumably this is Welsh Government officials seeking this evidence. There's not an expert group being set up to do so for you.
We'll be putting out a call for evidence first, and then we'll be looking to see how we take that forward. And just to mention the trade unions very specifically, of course, we work in social partnership here in Wales. We will be talking to the social partners, which are our trade unions and a number of third sector organisations. Trade unions are actually at the heart of that, to make sure that when we do this transition to a low carbon economy, the trade unions are front and centre of that. We absolutely have to make sure that we bring our workforce with us, and that this time, when Wales becomes the centre of a global industrial revolution, the people of Wales benefit and the resources of that are not exported.
Thank you.
Diolch. Diolch yn fawr.